Hey guys. Tonight's story starts with a puff of something unfamiliar, drifting through a cave, so old it probably remembers the invention of boredom. You're barefoot, wrapped in animal hide, sitting across from a man who hasn't blinked in a suspiciously long time. He offers you a smoldering bundle of herbs and tells you it's for clarity. You cough once, then again, and then suddenly the bison on the wall starts winking at you. Somewhere in the distance, a drum beat begins, though no one's holding a drum. And just like that, you've officially joined humanity's oldest and weirdest hobby. But before you get too cozy, I just wanted to take a quiet moment to mention something new. I recently made another channel called Science to Fall Asleep To. It's a little different, but just as good for drifting off. You can find the link down in the description and pinned comment. But while you're here, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And of course, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Alrighty, that's enough instructions for one night, isn't it? Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You smell smoke before you see it. It's not the sharp, urgent smoke of something on fire that shouldn't be. It's thicker, slower, the kind that curls around your ankles like it knows something you don't. The air in the cave is damp, clinging to your arms like a clingy cousin at a funeral. Somewhere behind you, water drips steadily from the ceiling with the sort of rhythm that makes your eyelid twitch. A fire crackles in the center, its light bouncing off the uneven walls like it's trying to escape. You squint at the man across from you. The shaman's name is either Tolu, or maybe he just says that when he sneezes. No one has clarified. His hair is wild in a way that seems more philosophical than unkempt, and his robe is made of something that was either once alive or once someone's curtain. He sits cross-legged, which you tried and immediately regretted, and he's got the kind of grin that suggests he's either extremely wise or hasn't slept since the last lunar eclipse. He doesn't speak so much as mutter things under his breath and then looks startled when you respond. Occasionally, he pauses mid-sentence to blink slowly at the fire, as if waiting for it to reply. When it doesn't, he shrugs and continues on as though it had made an excellent point. In front of him is a wooden bowl carved with the kind of patterns that only make sense if you squint and believe in dreams. Inside the bowl is a smoldering bundle of something green and suspiciously lumpy, wrapped in what might be bark or might be the sleeve of his last apprentice. You are handed the bundle. There is no ceremony, no chant, no dramatic lighting cue, just the casual flick of his wrist and a grunt that may translate to good luck, or, hold this, I need to sneeze. You stare at it. The smoke rises gently, sweet and earthy, with a hint of something floral and a whisper of something that makes your teeth feel like they're vibrating slightly out of sync with your skull. Meet the ancestors, he says, gesturing vaguely at the ceiling or the smoke or your own face. You don't ask if he means that literally. You've already made enough social missteps today, like asking if the ceremonial gourd was dishwasher safe. You bring the bundle to your lips. The smoke stings, but only briefly, like a very gentle slap from a particularly polite ghost. You inhale, because that seems prives, like the kind of thing one does in this situation, and instantly forget how to blink. The cave sways slightly, though it's unclear whether it's the cave or your perception of gravity doing the choreography. Your lungs fill with what can only be described as ancestral fog. It tastes like old wood, burned dreams, and something sweet that reminds you of a berry you once picked and immediately regretted. Somewhere inside your chest, a spark lights up, small and curious, like a squirrel poking its head out of a tree for the first time. The shaman nods approvingly, then forgets why he nodded, and starts humming something that might be a chant or might be the theme song to a very old sitcom no one remembers. Your eyes water, your thoughts slow. The fire looks like it's telling jokes, and the shadows on the wall begin to hold entire conversations with each other, occasionally glancing at you like you've interrupted something important. The drip from the ceiling becomes the loudest sound in the world, and you begin to suspect it is sending coded messages. You wonder if the cave itself is breathing. You wonder if you are breathing. You check. You are. The shaman says something about journeying inward, but his voice sounds like it's coming from a hallway that loops back into itself. You nod, solemnly. This feels right. You look at your hands. They're still hands, technically, but they now appear to contain both the history and future of the entire planet. You wiggle your fingers. Somewhere, a bird sings in response. You don't know if the bird is real. You don't care. A shape dances in the smoke. It's either your great-grandfather or a raccoon in a cloak. The distinction feels irrelevant. It nods at you respectfully, and then dissolves into a puff that smells faintly of pine and unresolved family drama. You think of soup. You don't know why, but it feels deeply important. The shaman claps once, startling both you and the fire, then settles back into his bready, muttering. The smoke curls into the shape of a spiral, then a bird, then something that looks suspiciously like a judgmental fish. You begin to understand, or at least, you think you do. It's hard to tell, because your brain has begun narrating your own thoughts in the voice of your childhood pet. You lean back against the wall of the cave, which sighs softly, either in protest or in empathy. Your limbs feel heavy and full of stories. The fire snaps once, like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that was never spoken. You have no idea what time it is. You are fairly certain time has stopped returning your calls. You close your eyes. The smoke is still there, curling behind your eyelids like a dream you don't remember having. The ancestors do not arrive. Or maybe they do, quietly, without introductions. Maybe they were already here. Maybe they're just letting you borrow their couch for a while. Either way, you're welcome. The cave is warmer now, though you're not entirely sure if it's the fire or the way your brain is starting to lean sideways inside your skull. The smoke hangs in the air like a lazy god, curling around your head, whispering things that might be wisdom or might be instructions for how to peel a potato using only your mind. Your legs have gone pleasantly numb. Your thoughts are slow and a bit sticky, like honey left too long in the sun. Every time you try to hold on to one, it slips away, waving politely on its way out. Across the fire, a man named Grug is dancing with the kind of passion typically reserved for exorcisms or large insects. He holds a stick above his head like it owes him money, spinning in increasingly erratic circles, and he is, for reasons known only to the universe, not wearing pants. His expression is one of divine purpose, possibly prophetic insight, possibly gas. Either way, he seems deeply committed. Someone coughs near the entrance. It's the kind of cough that suggests a mild disagreement with oxygen. No one reacts. A woman nearby giggles into her sleeve, then forgets what she was laughing about and tries to feed a rock to the fire. The fire, for its part, accepts the offering with a crackle that sounds suspiciously like approval. You begin to suspect that the fire is the only one in this cave with any authority, and even it is probably winging it. You shift, slowly, cautiously, like someone who isn't entirely sure their limbs are still part of the same contract with gravity. Your fingers trail through the smoke and come back feeling like they've touched something ancient and possibly judging you. You look at your hands again. They appear to be both yours and also potentially someone else's in a different dimension who is equally confused. The shaman, who's now humming to a beetle perched on his shoulder, offers you another puff from the ceremonial. Whatever it is, you accept, because declining would require effort, and also because the smoke seems to be doing something truly interesting to your understanding of colors. The cave walls shimmer slightly, as if they're debating whether to stay put or go for a walk. Groog stumbles into a pile of moss, declares it a spiritual portal, and promptly lays down on it. He begins whispering to the ceiling in a language that sounds like three owls arguing over rent. No one stops him. In fact, one man nods in agreement and removes his sandals, as if that somehow contributes. Your mind drifts gently sideways again. You remember a bird from your childhood, though you never had one. Still, the memory is crisp. Its feathers were blue. Its name was possibly Carl, and it had very strong opinions about clouds. You wonder if Carl is here now, watching, judging, maybe dancing with Groog. It seems possible. Everything seems possible. The smoke hums in your chest like a forgotten lullaby. Someone passes around a bowl of roasted something. You take one and chew carefully. It tastes like the concept of warmth, like someone once told a root how to be friendly. Across the fire, two elders are giggling like teenagers while drawing spirals in the dirt. One of them is attempting to name each puff of smoke as it leaves the fire, giving them titles like Mild Herald and the Great Left Toe. The air grows thicker. The smoke is no longer something you breathe so much as something you live inside. It's part of your eyelashes now, your tongue, your very understanding of sentence structure. You close your eyes and listen. There is music. Not drums, not flutes, just the distant, swirling kind of music that feels like it's made out of weather and old ideas. You hum along before realizing you're just exhaling loudly through your nose. The shaman stops humming. He stands up, stumbles once, rights himself, and declares the session complete, though no one seems to know what that means. Groog claps, or he falls over, and his hands just happen to slap together on the way down. Either way, it echoes. You sit in the silence that follows, if you can call it silence. The fire still crackles. The smoke still speaks in its swirly, nonsensical way. Someone, somewhere, is still chewing loudly on something they probably shouldn't. But within that strange, foggy chaos, you feel still. Not calm exactly, not clear, but still, like a pond that's finally decided to stop pretending to be a mirror. Outside the cave, the world waits. Trees sway. Crickets resume their gossip. A goat bleats in the distance with the tone of someone who's seen things and will never speak of them. But in here, in this sacred, slightly unventilated space, something has shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just enough that when you finally stand, swaying slightly like a sapling in a breeze, you know something inside you has changed, probably forever, or at least until the smoke clears. You step outside and immediately squint into the pale morning light. It's brighter than it has any business being, like the sun is showing off. The smoke still clings to your clothes, your skin, and maybe your soul. Everything feels a little softer, a little slower, like the world is underwater and no one told the air. The cave door, if you can call a crooked stone slab with a rope hanging off it, a door shuts behind you with a sound like a shrug. Birds chirp in the distance with the chaotic enthusiasm of creatures who have never paid rent. You're halfway through wondering if the trees are breathing too when you see it. The goat. It's standing perfectly still, halfway up a sloped rock, staring at you like it's been waiting all night for this exact moment. Its fur is matted in the way that suggests either profound wilderness survival or complete personal neglect. Its eyes are those strange sideways rectangles, and yet somehow they seem to peer directly into the parts of you you've been ignoring. You pause. The goat does not. It blinks once, slowly, and resumes chewing. The chewing is deliberate, meditative even. You get the distinct impression that this goat has tasted truths you're not ready for. It shifts its weight slightly, almost imperceptibly, and for a second, you think it might bow. It does not. That would be ridiculous, but it could. You take a hesitant step forward, and the goat's ears twitch like it's registering your footsteps as data for a larger, unknowable calculation. You open your mouth to say something you're not sure what, maybe hello or how, but all that comes out is a polite exhale and the faint sound of your own uncertainty. The goat keeps chewing. A breeze moves through the clearing, stirring the leaves, and whatever residual fog is still clinging to your thoughts. The world smells like moss, old rain, and slightly scorched bark. You realize, with a small jolt, that the goat hasn't blinked again. Not once. There is history in that stare. Maybe not human history, but some kind of narrative, some long, slow, hooved saga that has unfolded in silent fields while nobody was looking. You get the sense that the goat knows things, not in the way a wise elder knows things, but more in the way a librarian might know the location of a forbidden book and chooses never to speak of it. It steps down from the rock with the kind of measured grace that implies years of practice or perhaps an advanced degree in theater. It walks past you slowly, brushing your knee just slightly as it passes. You resist the urge to apologize, even though you're not sure why. As it disappears into the brush with a flick of its tail and zero explanation, you feel something odd, like you've just failed a test you didn't know you were taking. Somewhere, a bird laughs, probably at you. You stand there for a while longer, the breeze tugging gently at your sleeves, the sun beginning its slow, indifferent arc overhead. You're not sure what just happened, but you do know this. That goat knows something, and it's definitely not telling. You stumble back into the village with your stomach making noises that could either be hunger or some kind of ancient protest chant. The smoke from earlier still clings to you like an awkward conversation you forgot to end, curling around your clothes, your hair, and your very sense of time. It is unclear how long you've been gone. Could be 10 minutes, could be 3 suns. A small child points at you and says something in a language that might be a warning or a recipe. The food cache isn't so much a pantry as it is a very determined hole in the ground, guarded by a woman named Harka, who wears a necklace of bird bones and glares at everyone as if they're already guilty. She eyes you with suspicion, then lazily gestures toward a pile of leaves covering what appears to be several extremely confused root vegetables. You nod solemnly, the way people do when trying to appear respectful of cultural customs while also wondering if it's too late to run away. You kneel and begin to forage like a polite raccoon. The options are eclectic. There's a tuber that looks like it's judging you, a pile of berries that hums slightly when you get too close, and something wrapped in bark that may or may not be moving. You choose the root because it feels like the least risky option, and also because it vaguely resembles the shaman's nose, which for some reason makes it feel trustworthy. You bite in. It tastes like earth and confusion. There's a crunch, then a flavor that can only be described as brown. It is not bad exactly. It is just extremely committed to not being good. You chew thoughtfully, as if trying to uncover hidden meaning, and wash it down with a gulp from the communal water gourd, which smells like wet decisions and disappointment. A man squats next to you with the confidence of someone who has already eaten and now simply wants to judge others. He watches you chew for a moment before offering a handful of small, shriveled berries. You take one. It is tart, vaguely citrusy, and deeply suspicious. The man nods, satisfied, and then walks away backwards while maintaining eye contact. You hear giggling behind you. 2 women are crouched over a flat stone, grinding something green into a paste and licking it off their fingers like it's the finest delicacy known to humankind. One of them beckons you over and hands you a leaf with a dollop of the mixture. You accept, because refusing would break the fragile social fabric of this smoke-happy society, and also because you're beginning to suspect your tongue is open to new ideas. It tastes incredible. It is sour, sharp, slightly sweet, and finishes with the ghost of something floral. You blink, then blink again. You look at the woman. She smiles like someone who knows she just permanently shifted the course of your consciousness using nothing but herbs and peer pressure. You sit back and let the food settle into the strange, glowy fog that has now replaced your internal organs. Around you, others, are lounging in various stages of snack-induced reverence. One man is licking a rock for reasons unknown. Another is holding a mushroom aloft, like it's a trophy from a war no one remembers. A child toddles by, holding a roasted beet in both hands and looking like a tiny god of agriculture. Somewhere, someone starts singing. It's not in any recognizable key, but it's heartfelt. A few others join in, harmonizing not with notes, but with pure mood. You hum along because that seems to be the thing now. A woman offers you something flat, flaky, and warm from a stone oven that looks like it was designed by someone who's only heard rumors about fire. You bite in. It's chewy, vaguely spiced, and tastes like comfort. Or possibly bark. Hard to say. The sun begins to dip low in the sky, casting a sleepy amber hue over the village. People start to gather by the central fire again, their bellies full, their eyes soft, their bodies sagging into the earth like they've remembered how to be part of it. You realize you're smiling, not at anything in particular, just at the absurd magic of it all being fed by strangers who think you're part of a prophecy because you coughed a certain way, tasting foods that probably shouldn't go together but absolutely do, and feeling somehow like you've always belonged here. Someone hands you a roasted root with a little smear of that paste on top. You take it without hesitation. The flavor is better this time. Or maybe you are. Either way, it tastes like the beginning of something important. The smoke hadn't even cleared before the drums started. Not the celebratory kind, the suspicious kind. The kind that says, "We noticed your cave is billowing mysterious clouds, and we've either come to join or to burn your village down." Possibly both. You squint toward the tree line, where several equally squinty figures are emerging with spears, sticks, and one particularly ambitious fellow holding a fish like a weapon. The village elders look at one another with the tight-lipped panic of people who know they should have invented a flag, or at least a sign that says "not hostile, just vibing." One of them gestures wildly at the fire, then at the sky, then at you, which feels unfair, but perhaps justified. The shaman shrugs and starts humming again, which is rapidly becoming his solution to everything, including breakfast. The approaching group slows as they near the edge of the village. You can feel the collective inhale of your new neighbors. It's the kind of breath that precedes important things, speeches, declarations, regrettable shouting. Then a goat walks into the clearing. It is, unfortunately, your goat. Or at least, the goat that judged you earlier, and now seems determined to involve itself in matters of geopolitics. It saunters between both groups, gives a pointed bleat, and lies down in the exact middle, as if declaring neutral territory. No one knows what to do with this. The leader of the other village, a tall, wiry man with hair, like he combed it using lightning steps forward, and points at the smoke. He says something stern in a language full of consonants and distrust. Your village elder responds by offering him a root, which feels optimistic. The tall man sniffs it, blinks, then takes a bite. His expression goes through all 5 stages of culinary grief, but he chews with the honor of a man who understands the weight of diplomacy. It's unclear who makes the first laugh. Maybe it's the man with the fish. Maybe it's someone's grandmother remembering that time her son mistook fermented bark paste for hair oil. Regardless, it spreads like wildfire, or more aptly, like cave smoke. Soon everyone is chuckling, nodding, trying each other's mystery foods, and complimenting things that don't require translation, like impressive stick sizes and unusually symmetrical feet. You watch as someone passes around a leftover herb bundle from last night's festivities. It gets sniffed, tasted, then very carefully shared, with the kind of reverence usually reserved for sacred scrolls or grandmother's soup. A woman from the visiting group begins to dance, slowly at first, then with escalating enthusiasm. One of your villagers joins in, badly. Another follows, worse. It becomes clear that this is not a negotiation. This is a party pretending to be a meeting. Someone tries to toast with a bone cup full of something alarmingly purple. Another person mishears a greeting and responds with a detailed story about a dream involving fish, fire, and an angry ancestor. No one corrects anyone. Everyone nods sagely. You're handed a flatbread smeared with something spicy and luminous. It tastes like rain and chaos. You eat it anyway, because that's what you do when history is happening and everyone else is chewing. By nightfall, the two villages are indistinguishable. Children are chasing each other with painted stones. The goat is wearing someone's ceremonial beads. A few elders have tied their beards together in what appears to be a formal pact. A new fire is lit, not the signal kind, just the let's keep this party going kind, and someone begins carving a stone tablet with what might become the first ever peace treaty or a recipe for moss stew, possibly both. No one remembers why the other group showed up. Not really. There was smoke and confusion and maybe a fish, but what lingers is laughter, spice, and the soft scent of whatever that herb was, still wafting through the clearing like the world itself has taken one long, peaceful exhale. Fern has the kind of beard that suggests he's made peace with soup living in it. He is the village's unofficial thinker, philosopher, and once, very briefly, its acting fire warden, until he tried to convince a bonfire it was a misunderstood friend. He speaks rarely, but when he does, it's in the tone of someone absolutely sure the stars are talking to him. And possibly right. This morning, Fern declares he will weigh smoke. The statement is met with polite nods and one enthusiastic, yes, finally, from a man who once tried to teach a tree to whistle. Fern believes smoke is not just a byproduct of fire, but a messenger between worlds, a wisp of spirit. He calls it air with memory. He says this while squinting meaningfully at a squirrel, which does not acknowledge him. You watch from a comfortable distance as Fern assembles his tools: a cracked clay bowl, a stick, 3 pine needles, and a small pebble he refers to as the control. He sets them down on a flat rock as if presenting a feast to an invisible spirit of curiosity. The bowl is handmade, visibly lopsided, and bears the faded thumbprint of the potter, who gave up halfway through. Fern taps it twice for emphasis. The plan, as far as anyone can tell, is to light a bundle of herbs, place it in the bowl, trap the smoke with a bark lid, and then somehow measure the difference. There is no scale. There is no math. There is only Fern, faith, and the unshakable belief that you can measure a ghost with enough determination. He lights the herbs. They crackle gently, releasing that same sweet, slightly spicy scent that's become the village's unofficial background noise. The smoke coils upward, lazy and unconcerned, until Fern slams the bark lid down with dramatic flair and sits back, hands on his knees, like a proud parent watching a turnip sprout. Now, he says, we wait. You are unclear what, exactly, you're waiting for. Fern mutters about density, about the soul of flame, about how the spirit realm communicates in grams. Several villagers gather, offering quiet reverence, or at least the kind of respectful silence one gives to someone clearly on a journey. A child points and asks if the bowl is supposed to be bubbling. It is. Fern leans in. The bowl makes a sound. It's the sort of noise you hear right before something either hatches or explodes. Fern's eyes widen, which is impressive, because they were already quite wide. Then it happens. A sharp crack, a puff of scorched herbs, and the bowl shatters like a promise made under the influence of fermented beet juice. Clay shards fly in multiple directions, one of which includes your shin. The lid launches into the air and lands on a nearby goat, who accepts it without comment. Smoke billows out dramatically, curling like it's trying to spell something rude. Fern stares at the empty space where his experiment used to be. Then he raises one finger. It resisted. The crowd murmurs. Heads nod. One person gasps. Fern lifts a shard of the bowl, cradling it like a wounded soldier. The spirit was too strong, he whispers. It broke free. The child claps. Someone nearby starts calling him Fern the breaker. Someone else begins carving a commemorative stick. The goat licks the lid and then lays down in what is now, presumably, a sacred crater. Fern does not smile, but you can tell he is pleased. He stands and announces that the next phase of his research will involve weighing the wind's mood, then wanders off into the woods, muttering about balance and possibly raisins. You sit down on a log that smells like wet moss and success. The air is still thick with the spicy tang of smoke, the kind that clings to your thoughts and makes everything feel a little bit more like a story. Around you, people are still discussing the implications. Was the bowl too weak or the smoke too powerful? Did the spirit reject containment, or was this simply its natural reaction to being quantified? It doesn't matter. What matters is that Fern tried to weigh smoke, and the bowl exploded, and everyone agrees that means it worked. The ritual fire is already too large by the time anyone admits it. What began as a humble flame meant to send polite smoke messages to the heavens has become a roaring, swirling thing with opinions. Sparks leap like gossip, and the logs hiss dramatically every time someone adds more offerings. A piece of bark flies off, smacks a tree, and nobody blinks. It's just part of the show now. The priestess, draped in ceremonial feathers and what may once have been a curtain, circles the fire with a bowl of ash in one hand and a bundle of something leafy in the other. Her eyes are wide, her pace is deliberate, and she radiates the sort of focus usually reserved for bees and conspiracy theorists. She mutters sacred words under her breath, or possibly the lyrics to a song no one else knows. You stand among the gathered crowd, watching with the cautious respect one reserves for religious events and unpredictable bonfires. Children sit cross-legged in the dirt, whispering and poking each other with reverent sticks. An elder plays a single-note flute, off-key and very confident. The goat, ever present, chews a strip of someone's cloak and gazes into the fire like it remembers a past life. Then someone still unnamed, but later referred to as the brave fool, tosses a dried hemp bundle into the flames. There's a beat of silence, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms sit up like nervous scouts. The bundle hits the fire with a puff, and then a slow, lazy release of smoke that smells different, not unpleasant, just not the usual scent of burned offerings and pine sap. The smoke curls with more flair, thicker, sweeter, almost smug. It drapes itself over the clearing like a cloak that knows how good it looks. The priestess pauses mid-step. She sniffs the air once, twice, and then, slowly, begins to giggle. At first, it's a gentle sound, like a brook chuckling over a secret, but it grows, layer by layer, until she's full-on cackling, head thrown back, feathers shaking, arms flung wide as if embracing the absurdity of everything. The crowd shifts. People glance at one another. A few start laughing too, mostly from nervous reflex. A child gasps and declares she must be possessed. Another child asks if they can be next. The priestess wipes a tear from her eye and stares straight at the sun. "You," she says, pointing with both hands. "You great, glowing flirt." She winks, then falls into a heap of delighted laughter, so pure it becomes contagious. Several villagers drop to the ground beside her, rolling around in the dirt and clutching their stomachs like they've just remembered every funny thing that ever happened at once. Even the flute player misses a note, which honestly improves things. An elder steps forward, hands raised, eyes closed. "The gods have accepted the offering," he declares solemnly. "The spirits laugh with us." Someone starts humming. Someone else begins dancing in slow, zigzag patterns, mimicking the path of the smoke. A dog howls in the distance. The goat lies down with the air of one who has seen this exact scenario unfold before and has already written the ending. You feel it too, that looseness in the chest, that warmth behind your eyes, like the universe is leaning in a little closer and whispering not secrets, but jokes. You breathe in the fragrant haze, and suddenly the trees seem a bit taller, the stars a bit closer, the boundaries between sacred and silly entirely negotiable. By the time the sun begins to dip, glowing and perhaps slightly bashful under the priestess's continued flattery, the entire village is reclined in soft piles. No one's arguing, no one's working, no one's remembering why they were so serious all the time. The fire has calmed into glowing embers now, soft and watchful. The priestess sits cross-legged in the middle of the clearing, humming to herself and occasionally complimenting the moon for its mysterious vibe. No one questions her. It is, after all, divine proof. You're only supposed to be fetching herbs. That's it. Just a few leafy handfuls from the drying rack, maybe a root, if it looks sufficiently wrinkled. It's not glamorous, but it's your turn. And also, the healer has a bad knee and a worse attitude. The kind of woman who once made someone cry just by chewing too loudly in her hut. You want to be helpful, or at least not yelled at. That's the goal. So you walk carefully into the little smoke-sweet room where the herbs are hung like gossip, and you breathe through your mouth to avoid inhaling any mystery particles. Each bundle is labeled with charcoal drawings that are supposed to be clear, but most look like animals halfway through, transforming into furniture. You find what appears to be calming leaf, or possibly cow leaf. You take it anyway. It smells mild and slightly peppery, which feels right. Back in the healer's hut, the patient is sweating gently into a woven mat. He's old, but not in the usual way. His wrinkles seem less like age and more like topographical features, as if his face was once a map and forgot how to be anything else. He coughs occasionally, but mostly he just blinks at the ceiling like it owes him an explanation. The tea is steeped. The leaves float lazily, then sink like they've heard a troubling rumor. The healer mutters a chant under her breath, while stirring with a carved bone spoon that's probably older than most of the village. You hand her the bundle. She doesn't even glance at it, just tosses it in with the others. The smell shifts slightly, still earthy, but now tinged with something more curious. Nobody notices. Not really. The patient drinks. One slow sip, then another. He smacks his lips twice, nods once, and lies back with the contented sigh of someone who has just decided to float through the rest of the day. 10 minutes later, he sits bolt upright and announces that the moon is lying. The healer looks up sharply. You freeze, holding a basket of stones that were supposed to be warmed for a foot compress. The man's eyes are wide and glowing with a kind of energy that feels far too awake for someone who was wheezing an hour ago. He begins speaking, rapidly, but not in any known language. It sounds like bird calls and weather. He gestures grandly with his arms, points to the corner of the hut, and says something that might be antlers beneath the river. The healer stares. You start backing away. Within the hour, the man has drawn 3 birds in the dirt. None of them exist. One has 6 wings, one has no wings but carries a staff, and the last has a spiral where its face should be. He insists they visit him when the wind is soft and the sky pretends not to look. The villagers gather, slowly at first, then in clusters. Someone brings a drum. Someone else offers berries. Children sit cross-legged, wide-eyed, watching this man who now wears his blanket like a cape and calls the fire Old Cousin Ash. He speaks only in riddles now. The tree knows what the stone forgot. He whispers to a toddler, who immediately bursts into tears and is then calmed by being told that the tree probably meant well. The healer glares at you. You try to look helpful, but she already knows. At some point, she picked up a leaf from the emptied bundle and sniffed it. Her eyebrow twitched. That's all it took. Cosmic leaf. Not calming. Not even close. Used sparingly during eclipses and only when 2 elders agree to supervise. Highly ceremonial. Slightly unpredictable. Last time it was used, a man insisted he could hear colors and refused to sleep unless someone whispered the names of rivers into his ear. But no one is mad. Not this time. Because the patient whose name was once just Old Bennick has become something else. A voice, a bridge, a whispering channel between this world and whatever's lurking behind the stars with too much free time. They call him the Sky Mouth now. He eats only soft roots and occasionally licks stones for texture. He no longer sleeps, just hums. When people have questions, they bring him offerings, feathers, polished sticks, questions scribbled on bark. He answers them with riddles that don't feel like answers, but still leave people blinking slowly and nodding like they just understood something deep about frogs. You return to the herb hut the next day. The labels seem even less readable now. One looks like a goat in a boat. Another might be screaming. You take a deep breath, reach for the next bundle, and make very sure it smells boring. It starts with a cold night and a missing blanket. You're not sure where the blanket went, possibly traded for turnips, possibly stolen by the goat, possibly never existed in the first place, and you've just been very confident about being warm until now. Either way, your toes are frozen, and you're left rummaging through the communal supply pile, which is less a pile and more a chaotic suggestion of one. That's when you find the rope. Technically, it's hemp cord, thick and scratchy and fraying at the ends like it's been through several moral crises. It's not doing much else, no one's currently hauling anything, and it's too short to trip over usefully, so you figure you'll burn it. Just a little. Enough to warm your fingers and maybe roast a berry or two if things get desperate. You feed it into the fire. The flames take to it with enthusiasm. There's a hiss, a snap, and then the smoke changes. Not in a dramatic way, just subtly. Like the air has suddenly remembered a funny joke from years ago. It curls upward in spirals that feel oddly intentional. You sit back, blinking as the warmth washes over you, and that's when your shadow starts talking. Not loudly, just a quiet hum, a murmur from the corner of your eye, where the firelight stretches your outline across the dirt. You turn to look at it and it ripples, actually ripples like it's waving. You wave back, obviously. It nods. You both agree that this is now a conversation. The first topic is crickets. You're not sure who brings it up, but you and the shadow spend 10 full minutes discussing the emotional lives of crickets, how they feel about moonlight, and whether their chirping is a language or just very persistent hope. The shadow thinks it's both. You disagree, but respectfully. It's a good debate. You laugh. The shadow laughs too, a soft shimmer that rustles through the grass like wind made of secrets. Then you talk about rhythm, about how the wind moves in patterns, how water slaps rocks in 3 seconds and 5 seconds, how trees creak on the offbeat. You slap your knee. The shadow mimics you. Soon you're both tapping rocks, sticks, the ground, your own chest building strange syncopations that feel accidental and holy. You're sure you've discovered something, a pulse, a feeling, a music that lives under things. You call it plunk. Then, hours later, you call it Jaj. That feels better. The stars nod in approval. Eventually, you fall asleep on your side, grinning into the moss like you've just won an argument with the concept of silence. The fire has died down, but the smoke still clings to your clothes, your fingers, your dreams. When you wake, you're convinced 2 things have happened. 1. You've invented a new form of expression that cannot be taught, only felt. 2. Your belt is missing. It takes a few minutes before you realize your fuel from the night before was not scrap rope, but your own woven hemp belt, now reduced to ash and inspiration. You stand slowly, patting your tunic in vain, and try to piece together exactly what you said to your own silhouette. The shadow offers no comment. You shuffle back into the village, barefoot, pants threatening betrayal. You hum the rhythm from the night before. It's still good. It still slaps. You grab 2 flat stones and start tapping them together. People watch. A child joins in. Someone adds a whistle. It builds, layer by layer, awkward, jagged, alive. The elder passes by, raises an eyebrow, and mutters, "Ah." The beltless one brings noise. You nod solemnly, because noise is now an art form. seen its shape. You've heard the shadow sing, and you are absolutely certain that what you did last night was history. You've been walking uphill for what feels like several moons and possibly one minor existential crisis. The path is mostly rocks, fog, and the occasional bird that stares at you like it knows your secrets. No one told you where the oracle lives. They just said, up, then made a motion that was either a blessing or a wrist cramp. So you keep climbing, hoping for wisdom, or at the very least, a place to sit that isn't aggressively shaped like a potato. At last, the fog parts. You find her sitting on a rock so smooth it looks like the mountain sculpted it just for this exact purpose. The oracle doesn't rise, doesn't speak. She simply exhales, long and slow, like she's been saving that breath since the Ice Age. A faint ribbon of smoke curls from the end of a pipe carved out of something that might be bone or very persuasive wood. Her eyes are mostly closed, but not entirely. She sees you, probably saw you long before you stumbled over that last root and loudly apologized to a bush. You approach with the reverence of someone who once knocked over an offering bowl and still feels weird about it. The air smells like pine needles and something more mysterious like old books or forgotten soup. You bow, because that feels right, and wait. She sighs again. You nod as if that clears something up. It doesn't. She gestures to a flat rock nearby. You sit. It's cold. You pretend it isn't. You wait. Another sigh, deeper this time. It settles into the mountain like it belongs there. You're not sure what's being communicated, but you feel strangely understood, like she's just summarized your entire personality using breath alone. You decide to speak. I've come to ask. She holds up one finger. You stop. She sighs. This one has a kind of arc to it, a rise and fall that reminds you of the time you tried to build a shelter out of wet leaves and woke up inside a raccoon's personal pantry. It's a sigh that says, you already know the answer, but fine, I'll humor you. You nod solemnly. You don't know the answer, but you feel like you might, if you just keep listening. She taps the pipe once against the stone, then takes another drag. Smoke drifts upward, spiraling into a shape that might be a bird or a deeply judgmental spoon. Her silence is somehow louder than most conversations you've had. It's not the kind of silence that demands to be filled. It's the kind that fills you. More sighs. One wistful, one bored, one that sounds like it's mourning the extinction of a particularly friendly mushroom. You don't take notes. You don't need to. The wisdom lands somewhere behind your eyes and makes itself at home. Hours pass, or maybe it's only minutes. Time behaves differently when you're trying to decode psi-based theology. Others arrive. One by one, they settle onto rocks like obedient moss. No one talks. They just listen, occasionally nodding like someone's grandmother at a very confusing wedding. You're not sure what they've come for. Maybe the same thing as you. Maybe not. The oracle sighs again, this time with the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions and exactly 0 concern about them. A squirrel runs past and stops to listen. You're not even surprised. By the time the sun begins its slow escape behind the peaks, you've stopped needing explanations. The oracle hasn't said a single word, but somehow you've never felt more gently corrected. You rise. She doesn't look at you, but she does sigh once more, short, sharp, like punctuation at the end of a very patient sentence. You bow again. This time, the motion feels less like formality and more like thanks. As you descend the mountain, someone asks if she gave you an answer. You smile and say, "She told me to sit more." They nod like that makes perfect sense. And, oddly enough, it does. The scroll arrives tied with a silk ribbon and sealed with a wax stamp shaped like a cloud reclining on a mountain. It's elegant, ornate, and smells faintly of something floral and unhurried. You break the seal like you've done something important just by being chosen to open it. Inside is a decree from the emperor, written in brush strokes that seem to drift across the page like they have somewhere else to be, but aren't in a rush to get there. Hemp is now sacred, it reads. Please proceed accordingly. There's no follow-up explanation, no stern warnings, just a polite suggestion to relax one's expectations regarding urgency. It's signed in gold ink and footnoted with a poetic observation about koi fish and destiny. You live in a small village, nestled among rice paddies and polite hills, where the most exciting event last year was a goat sneezing 3 times in a row. Naturally, the decree becomes the topic of every conversation within the hour. By sunset, 3 scholars have begun growing hemp in the temple garden, 2 poets have declared the leaves inherently wise, and a calligrapher named June insists he can hear his quill humming more beautifully after sniffing a dried stalk for 10 minutes. Word spreads like gossip on a warm breeze. By the end of the week, the empire has shifted in tone. Military drills are paused until the mood feels right. Bureaucrats speak more softly and wear looser robes. The Minister of Agriculture is found lying under a cherry tree, whispering encouragement to his sandals. No one's quite sure if it's enlightenment or exhaustion, but either way, he seems profoundly at peace. A new holiday is declared, the Day of Soft Thoughts. It falls on the first day of the 5th moon, and the official instructions are simple. Do less, but enjoy it more. Villagers light incense, braid hemp into small tokens, and spend the afternoon in hammocks or leaning against things thoughtfully. Arguments are postponed. Chores are approached like interpretive dance. Even the roosters crow at a more reasonable volume. You join your neighbors in the central square, where someone has painted a giant spiral on the ground for absolutely no reason. There's tea with hints of something earthy and slightly giggly. A man plays a flute that occasionally squeaks, and everyone applauds like it was supposed to. Someone else is building a tower out of flat stones, insisting each one represents a softer way to understand gravity. Children run in slow motion, not because they were told to, but because it seems like the right speed for today. Meanwhile, in the capital, the emperor sits beneath an elaborate pavilion shaped like a lotus mid-laughter. He wears a robe stitched with clouds, stars, and at least one very smug turtle. His advisors kneel nearby, offering scrolls that he accepts with a serene nod, then promptly forgets to read. Instead, he stares at the sky for a very long time and says, "I think the sun is practicing something." No one disagrees. You hear rumors that the empire's war plans have been completely reorganized into haiku. That one general left his sword behind to paint a portrait of a rock he met on a walk. That disputes between provinces are now settled with shared naps and compliments. Trade flourishes. So does laughter. So does a particular strain of hemp that's now referred to in whispers as cloud tongue. You lie back in the grass and watch a paper lantern drift by overhead. Someone nearby murmurs that peace is just war wearing pajamas. You're not sure what that means, but you nod anyway, because honestly, it feels true. And for the first time in a long while, the empire feels like it's breathing in rhythm. You're not supposed to be down here. The air is thick with centuries and something else you can't name but would describe, if pressed, as warm and vaguely judgmental. Dust clings to your eyelashes. Everything echoes like it's being politely repeated by the afterlife. You step carefully, torch in hand, into the newly opened chamber where the walls are covered in hieroglyphs that mostly seem to feature lounging cats and wide-eyed priests holding plants like they're cradling secrets. In the center of the room is a stone altar. On it sits a bowl of dried resinous clumps wrapped in linen, several bundles of papyrus, and an incense burner still stained with the ghosts of 1,000 burnt offerings. A scribe mutters something about divine botanicals. An archaeologist sneezes twice and claims it's the gods. You lean in closer. The sticky stuff smells familiar, not in a memory kind of way, but in a someone has definitely hotboxed near me kind of way. A priest appears. Where from? You don't know, because you were pretty sure you were the first one in here. He's wearing the traditional garb, linen, gold, and a smile that suggests he's been in a very long conversation with the stars. He picks up a bit of the resin, crumbles it into the incense bowl, and lights it like he's starting a bedtime story. The smoke curls up in slow, deliberate spirals. You inhale instinctively. You start to understand cats. Not in a literal sense, but emotionally, deeply. Their choices suddenly make perfect sense. The staring, the aloofness, the sleeping for 20 hours, and then sprinting across the room at nothing. You feel it in your bones. A kind of ancestral shrug. Someone in the corner hums and writes on a scrap of papyrus, something about chasing sunbeams of the soul. The priest sighs contentedly and gestures for you all to sit. There's no ceremony, just a vibe. He speaks softly about harmony, sacred geometry, and how sometimes the best form of worship is not doing anything loudly. He says the gods speak in colors and occasionally through goosebumps. He explains how this plant helps tune the body to frequencies that were previously reserved for cats and extremely confident frogs. You believe him. The tomb walls glow in the torchlight. On one panel, a depiction of what appears to be a pharaoh offering a bundle of herbs to a jackal-headed god, who in return presents a loaf of bread and what looks like a thumbs up. On another, a woman lounges beneath a fig tree while smoke wafts toward the heavens in neatly stylized curls. She is labeled, "She Who Listens to the Moon." You want that title on a necklace. Someone starts chanting. It's unclear if it's part of the ritual or just something they felt compelled to do. Either way, everyone joins in. Outside, the desert shifts. Sand whispers through ancient stones. Inside, time melts a little. No one rushes. No one argues. A bowl of dates is passed around and everyone nods in agreement that they are, in fact, the best dates anyone has ever had. One man is gently petting a statue and murmuring apologies for ever doubting it. The priest leans over and says, "They thought it was just incense, but the gods knew." He winks. You're not sure if it's at you or the ibis carving over your shoulder. When you finally step back out into the daylight, blinking like a confused tortoise, the sun feels somehow rounder, a little more forgiving. The wind brushes past you like it's got good news, and for the first time in a long time, you understand why cats always look like they're in on something you haven't been told. The camel has stopped walking, not in a dramatic collapse, but in a quiet, thoughtful way, as if it just remembered something from a past life and needs a moment. You're halfway between somewhere important and somewhere less urgent, on a spice route that winds through the desert like it's trying to avoid eye contact. The sun has slouched behind the dunes. The wind is warm and curious. Someone throws a bundle into the fire. No one asks what it is. In fairness, no one has asked what anything is for about an hour. The desert has a way of making questions feel like effort. The fire accepts the offering with a sharp hiss and a puff of greenish smoke that doesn't rise so much as meander. You're sitting on a faded rug that smells like cinnamon and travel, watching the stars begin their slow unfurling above. One by one, they appear, as if they've all been waiting behind a curtain. Then the smoke reaches your face. It smells like burnt sage, honey, and a decision you didn't mean to make. Your thoughts loosen, not fall apart, just stretch, like they've been sitting too long and need to walk around. The desert, which a moment ago felt vast and impersonal, now hums like it's about to tell a secret. Someone on the other side of the fire begins laughing quietly. You're not sure why, but it feels entirely justified. You glance at the navigator, who has always claimed to sense direction in his knees. He is currently staring at his hands like they're maps, with particularly juicy gossip. You ask which way is north. He blinks slowly, like he's translating the question into several languages before forgetting what the question was. Eventually, he points upward. You thank him. Another trader pulls out a lute and strums something not entirely musical, but deeply meaningful. The rhythm is unpredictable, the melody questionable, but everyone sways like it's the anthem of their souls. A woman beside you starts braiding her own hair into the shape of a scorpion. No one comments. It feels sacred. The camels have begun humming. You're not sure if they've always done that or if it's a new development, but it suits them. One is gazing at the fire like it's remembering its first poem. You sip from a clay cup of something labeled tea and tasting like dreams that forgot to be nightmares. A trader named Imal recites poetry about sand that falls in love with wind. Someone claps slowly. You join in. You ask again if anyone remembers where you were headed. There is a long pause, filled with starlight and someone chewing very reflectively on a fig. Finally, a voice says, "Does it matter? Look at the moon. It's doing a thing. You do. It is. Or maybe it isn't, but it feels like it is." Someone brings out a silver bowl of dates and olives. No one uses words anymore. Just nods, smiles, and the occasional of deep cosmic agreement. The desert breathes, and the fire crackles in a language older than trade. Eventually, someone mutters that dawn will find you, whether you know where you're going or not. That seems true. So you lie back on your rug, using your rolled-up tunic as a pillow, and stare up at the sky that now looks like a jeweled plate made for gods. You feel small, wide, timeless. The stars pulse gently, like they're blinking just for you. And somewhere out there, a direction probably exists. You just don't feel like needing it right now. You return to your village expecting the usual things: goats in a mild argument, smoke curling from stew pots, and someone dramatically misremembering local history. What you don't expect is Seth, the farmer, sitting in the middle of his wheat field with wild eyes, unwashed hair, and a firm belief that his crops are spreading rumors about him. They whisper at dawn, he says, pointing at the golden stalks like they've wronged him personally. Call me lazy. Say I underwatered, that I'm emotionally dependent on my hoe. You blink. He does, in fact, look emotionally dependent on his hoe. It rests across his lap like a comfort animal with a blade. You ask if he's been sleeping. He narrows his eyes and says, "Not since the barley started laughing. This is a new problem, but not the weirdest. You've lived here long enough to remember when the fishmonger briefly tried to marry a log. That said, wheat-based paranoia is still a top 5 surprise. Out of politeness or curiosity or boredom, it's hard to tell you, walk into the field. The wheat parts around you, like it knows how to stage an entrance. It sways, but not with the wind. There is no wind, just heat and silence, and the faint creak of Seth, chewing a piece of dry grass dramatically behind you. The field feels aware, not in a sentient way. Not exactly. More like a crowd trying not to be caught watching you. You crouch and place your hand on the soil. It's warm and crumbly, and gives off that ancient, honest smell of things slowly becoming something else. The wheat stands tall, rustling just a little, then not at all. You glance over your shoulder and find Seth still staring, eyes wide, jaw tight. "I think they're waiting," he whispers. You ask what for. He shrugs. Judgment, harvest, forgiveness. Hard to say. You consider reminding him that plants don't generally hold grudges, but then again, you've recently spoken to a camel who seemed pretty condescending, and there was that mushroom that made you speak in riddles for a week. So, really, who are you to say? Later that evening, the village council meets to discuss Seth's situation, which is what they're calling it now instead of that thing with the wheat. Opinions vary. The healer suggests it's stress. The priest says it might be divine punishment for skipping the last solstice offering. Groob just offers everyone half a turnip and says, maybe they're just chatty. No one disagrees. That night, you camp near the field. You don't mean to. You were just going for a short walk. But the stars were particularly persuasive, and the breeze kept nudging you gently in this direction. Now you're lying in the wheat, staring up at a moon that feels unreasonably large. Everything is quiet. Then, a whisper. It's not words. Not exactly. More like intention. A soft collective shuffling of thoughts, just out of reach. Like a room full of people deciding whether or not to tell you a secret. You hold your breath. You listen. And you get the distinct impression that, yes, the wheat has been talking. Not mean-spirited. Just observant. They know when Seth skips watering. They know who tripped over the irrigation ditch last week. They know which villager kissed whom behind the grain storage. They're just interested. It's not judgment. It's just attention. You wake up with straw in your hair and a new respect for plants with opinions. Seth greets you at the edge of the field, holding 2 mugs of something warm and slightly spicy. They say you listen better than most, he tells you. You nod. Sip. Say nothing, and from the corner of your eye, the wheat nods too. It starts, as it always does, with a goat wearing a wreath of flowers and someone shouting, "Fire," but in the celebratory way. The Festival of Flames arrives with no formal invitation, just a deep drumbeat that rolls across the hills like thunder trying to dance. Villagers gather with paint on their cheeks, leaves in their hair, and absolutely no plan beyond burn things safely and feel something important. You're not sure what's being celebrated exactly. Some say it's the arrival of the sun's favorite month. Others claim it honors a long-dead ancestor who once outran lightning by accident. No one agrees, and no one cares. The drums have started. The air hums with anticipation and an unhealthy amount of spark potential. A bonfire crackles in the center of the village square, tall enough to make the moon squint. Children toss bundles of herbs into the flames, each one releasing a different scent, sweet, smoky, floral, and one that smells suspiciously like roasted onion, but is apparently sacred. You stand near the edge, watching dancers whirl with ribbons and painted hands, their movements somewhere between chaos and precision. Then someone throws hemp into the fire, not in a ceremonial way, more like they were trying to toss in kindling and grab the wrong bundle, but committed halfway through. The fire doesn't mind. It flares, exhales a thick, curling plume of fragrant smoke, and everyone near it takes an involuntary inhale. The energy shifts, the drumming slows slightly, then speeds up again like it forgot what beat it was supposed to follow. The dancers start moving with more intention, less structure. One woman begins tracing patterns in the air that don't correspond to any known tradition but feel deeply necessary. A man drops to the ground and starts drawing with mud, his fingers moving quickly and without hesitation. You approach to look. It's something. Spirals and jagged lines, a series of chaotic dots, and what might be an angry owl or an emotionally overwhelmed potato. He steps back, looks at his work, and nods solemnly. It's called becoming the echo, he says. You have no idea what that means, but it feels like the kind of thing you're supposed to murmur approval at. So you do. Others gather, tilt their heads, and whisper things like provocative and deeply internal. One woman begins to cry. No one asks why. The goat lies down next to the painting and sighs. Meanwhile, the fire has begun to dance too. Not literally, but you swear its flames are moving with rhythm now, pulsing in time with the drums. Smoke trails twist upward like ideas trying to take shape. Someone's singing in a language you're fairly sure they made up on the spot. It's beautiful. You find yourself sitting cross-legged in the dirt, watching shadows stretch and collapse around you. Time wobbles. Someone offers you a fig. You accept. It tastes like forgiveness. A child walks past, dragging a long stick, leaving a perfect line through the mud artwork. The artist gasps, pauses, and then declares it genius. The crowd erupts in applause. The night deepens. Stars gather to eavesdrop. You feel your thoughts slow into something almost round. The flames shrink, coals glow like quiet hearts, and the drums fade into the distance. The festival winds down not with an announcement, but with a shared exhale. Someone mumbles, "We should do this every week." Someone else replies, "We do." You lie back and stare at the sky, still unsure what any of this was for, but feeling like you're made of softer edges now. The mud painting remains, strange and sacred, surrounded by footprints and fig stems, and though no one will say it aloud, everyone agrees. That was definitely art. It begins the way these things always do, with absolutely no explanation. Gerald the goat, fur tousled by wind and ego, emerges from behind the grain hut with a calmness that suggests he's been waiting for this moment since before time had a name. His hooves barely make a sound as he walks through the crowd gathered for morning stew and low-stakes gossip. Heads turn, spoons freeze mid-air. The priestess stops mid-hiccup. He walks straight into the sacred fire circle. No one stops him. You think about doing it for half a second, but there's something in the way Gerald holds eye contact with the horizon that convinces you otherwise. This is not your business. This is Gerald's business. And if anyone here understands ancient protocol, it's the goat who once kicked the shaman into a pond and then watched him apologize. The flames crackle, but make room. The smoke coils upward like it's trying to behave. Gerald settles down in the exact center of the fire circle, folds his legs like he's rehearsed it, and stares directly into the coals, not around them, not near them, into them, with the focus of a being who has seen things and chosen, for the safety of others, not to speak of them. Someone whispers, "He's communing." Another adds, "Or warming his butt." You aren't sure either, but the air has shifted. The birds go quiet. The wind holds its breath. The soup pot is left to overboil, and no one moves to stop it. Gerald's presence demands stillness in a way that no elder ever could, despite years of long stories about spears and imaginary wars with the next valley over. An hour passes. He does not blink. You check. Twice. A child tries to offer him a carrot. The carrot is ignored. The child leaves with a new sense of rejection and what might be the beginning of spiritual awareness. Someone starts taking notes on bark. The priestess begins humming under her breath, a tune you've never heard before but which feels like it's always existed. A man starts crying softly, then stops, then starts again with less shame and more conviction. You feel like something is about to happen. Nothing does. Another hour passes. Gerald remains. A second goat, younger and more impulsive, tries to approach the fire circle. Gerald lifts his head a single inch. The younger goat halts like it's been slapped by thunder and retreats into the bushes. The message is clear. This is not your circle. This is not your time. A low rumble of thunder rolls across the hills, despite no clouds. It could be a coincidence. No one thinks it is. The sun begins to lower, casting a soft amber light across the village. Gerald finally shifts. He rises slowly, gives a long, thoughtful sniff toward the sky, and walks away without a word, a glance, or a goodbye. He disappears behind the same grain hut he emerged from, as if none of this happened, and you've all just imagined a deeply transformative silence shared with an emotionally complex barnyard creature. No one speaks for another minute. Then the shaman claps once and says, "He's approved the harvest." You don't know what harvest. There's been no mention of one, but it feels true. Everything feels true right now, and strangely edible. Gerald will not return for 3 moons. During that time, the village becomes unusually cooperative. Arguments resolve faster. Soup improves. The fire pit is cleaned regularly and spoken to with reverence. A mural of Gerald appears on the side of the hut, painted in ash and beet juice. It is surprisingly accurate, and though no one claims to understand what really happened that day, everyone agrees on 2 things. Something shifted, and the goat knows. You don't set out to be a smuggler. You set out with a pouch of seeds, a decent walking stick, and a vague promise from an older cousin that there's a land beyond the river where people will trade actual gold for interesting plants. What no one tells you is that the river is full of leeches, the map is mostly decorative, and the plants in question are controversial. The pouch doesn't look like much. A soft leather sack, tied with a bit of frayed rope, worn smooth by nervous hands. But inside are seeds dark, speckled, slightly oily to the touch. They smell faintly like rain on stone and make a soft whispery sound when you shake the bag, like they're quietly conspiring. You're not sure if that's just in your head, but the effect is persuasive. You cross borders under moonlight. You dodge guards by pretending to be a very lost beekeeper. You develop a limp purely for sympathy points and discover that fake limping is harder to maintain than it looks. But eventually, you arrive. A bright, sun-drenched valley dotted with small homes and one very large temple dedicated to the Lady of the Wind, who has excellent hair. You decide not to question it. The market is loud and full of smells that rearrange your memories. Spiced fruits, sizzling meat, and something you can only describe as wet hope. You set up a small stall with nothing but a smile, a bundle of herbs for misdirection, and your pouch tucked beneath a layer of dried beets. It doesn't take long for someone to notice. He calls himself Rook, though you're fairly certain that's not his real name. No one with that many earrings has a real name. He squints at the beets, then at you, then says the phrase that sets your entire week on fire. Got anything interesting? You hesitate, then show him one seed, just one. His eyes widen the way eyes do when something long buried stirs in the back of the brain and whispers, "Remember me?" He doesn't speak. He just nods slowly and drops a silver coin the size of your palm onto the table. You don't know the exchange rate, but you're suddenly sure it's too much. You take it anyway. Within a day, your stall becomes suspiciously popular. Within 3, local officials begin wandering by in the extremely casual way that says they are definitely watching you. You start hearing whispers. Sacred plants, forbidden growth. One man asks if your seeds are the kind that speak to the soil. You say no. He winks and says, "They all say that at first." Eventually, you're summoned to the temple of the excellent-haired wind lady, where you are greeted by 5 solemn elders and one guy holding a lute. He clearly does not know how to play. They ask if you've been spreading agricultural chaos. You say no. They ask if you understand the implications of what you're selling. You say, "Sort of." One elder eats a seed. He sits quietly for a full minute before saying, "I see purple when I hear bells now." The others nod as if this is both bad and impressive. You're asked to leave, but not before being handed a scroll detailing the new law you've inspired. No planting without supervision. You leave the valley with fewer seeds and more stories. In one village, you're remembered as a heretic. In another, a healer. In at least 3, a walking botanical mystery. You never quite go home. There's always another border, another market, another stranger with curious eyes and a quiet question. Got anything interesting? And in your pocket, the seeds whisper. You're sitting in a creaky pew carved by someone who clearly had unresolved issues with symmetry, staring at the back of a priest who's holding a scroll like it just told him a secret. The chapel smells like damp stone and ambition. Light filters through warped glass, casting gentle halos over dust particles that seem to be dancing very slowly, maybe too slowly. The sermon hasn't technically started yet, but the energy is different. Father Theobald, usually a man of rigid posture and even more rigid opinions, is swaying ever so slightly. He doesn't appear drunk, just profoundly at peace with the concept of elbows. His robes are slightly singed at the hem, and there's a faint trail of smoke rising from the censer he prepared himself this morning with herbs from the old cabinet. No one's touched that cabinet in years. You're starting to see why. He clears his throat. Once, then again because the first one was mostly air. "Beloved flock," he begins, and already you can tell this isn't going to be a normal sermon. His voice has the smooth, lilting cadence of someone talking to a sleeping baby or a tree. Today's message is about light. Not like metaphorical light. I mean real light. Have you ever really looked at it? It's wow. There's a pause while he stares up at the ceiling and seems genuinely surprised it's still there. A few villagers glance at each other, but no one interrupts. This is frankly the most engaged he's been in months. He's usually a man of stone tablets and moral warnings, but now he's pacing the altar barefoot and asking questions like, what if the divine isn't up, but in? You blink slowly, so does everyone else. At some point during the sermon, which has now morphed into more of a shared reflection with occasional humming, he pulls out a small loaf of bread and starts gently tearing pieces off to feed the birds nesting in the rafters. You hadn't noticed the birds before. You also hadn't noticed how perfect the acoustics in here are for deep thoughts about clouds. I was reading this scroll, he explains, waving it like it might take flight, and it had this recipe. Said it was for clarity of communion. I thought it was metaphorical. It wasn't. I feel like I've been wrapped in warm moss. He sits down on the steps, not collapses, sits, cross-legged, hands in lap. The image of serene confusion. A single, contented sigh escapes him like incense. One of the older women in the back whispers, "He's been touched." Her friend responds, "So was my cousin once. He thought he was a squirrel for a whole week, lived in a bucket." But no one leaves. Instead, something strange begins to happen. A man known primarily for yelling about fence maintenance stands up and says he's sorry for that time. He kicked the town scarecrow out of jealousy. A teenage boy leans forward and whispers that he's never felt so understood, even though no one said anything directly to him. A goat, possibly Gerald's cousin, wanders in, lays down in the aisle, and is immediately declared sacred. By the end of the hour, no official doctrine has been delivered, no sins tallied, no tithes demanded. Just a growing sense among the congregation that maybe belief isn't a ladder but a hammock. Maybe the divine isn't yelling from the clouds but humming softly through cracked stone and accidental herbs. The bell doesn't ring. The service simply ends. People drift out like leaves, faces soft, smiles lopsided. Someone starts singing something that doesn't have words, and somehow everyone knows the tune. The next week, the church doors stay open, always. People come to sit, breathe, sometimes nap. A sign goes up over the door, painted in shaky letters, "Whatever feels right." The bishop writes a letter of concern. No one reads it. The queen is not supposed to inhale. This is made very clear in the handbook, which no one actually reads, but everyone references as though they do. Royal lungs are sacred, preserved for ceremonial sighs and disapproving gasps. But one afternoon, when the court is distracted by a diplomatic pigeon gone rogue, she does. It starts with a gift, a delicate pipe carved from ivory, inlaid with green stones that shimmer like they know secrets. The ambassador from a far-off land insists it's for clarity of vision and elevated thoughts. The queen, who has endured 6 meetings that morning about wheat taxes and one deeply uncomfortable sonnet recital, raises an eyebrow. "Clarity?" she asks, already holding the pipe like it's a scepter. The ambassador nods solemnly, then trips over his own foot and apologizes to a curtain. So, she lights it. Not in the privacy of her chambers, not under the cover of moonlight, but right there in the royal garden, beneath a tree that's been standing longer than the monarchy itself. Courtiers freeze mid-sentence. Birds forget how wings work. A gardener slowly backs into a hedge and does not return. The smoke curls around her head like a crown with opinions. She exhales, eyes half-lidded, and says, "I see the problem with Parliament. They've never watched clouds long enough." Within 10 minutes, the Chancellor is weeping gently into a rosebush. A lady-in-waiting is asking a squirrel for advice. Lord Taversham, a man previously known only for his aggressive opinions on soup temperature, is composing something on a lute with exactly one string. By nightfall, it has a name. My Mind is a Duck. It's not just a song, it's an event, a movement, a sensation that spreads through the court like wildfire made of velvet and whispers. The lyrics are mostly quacking sounds and one line about floating on the pond of consciousness, but they hit something primal. Nobles hum it in corridors, servants whistle it while polishing forks. The queen has it played during meals, nodding along like the duck speaks directly to her soul. Parliament, understandably, panics. They hold an emergency session in which half the members confess they've also tried the pipe, but only in controlled environments, like the back of the pantry or under large hats. The other half denounce it with the kind of passion usually reserved for plagues and unexpected nudity. A decree is drafted. The pipe is banned. The song is banned. The queen is not consulted. The ban lasts 3 days. On the 4th, the royal portrait painter accidentally leaves a sketch on display showing Her Majesty riding a giant duck made of fog. She finds it delightful. Commissions 3 more. By the week's end, she's added High Empress of Chill to her list of titles and ordered that all future council meetings begin with a reflective pause and optional soft inhalation. The pipe returns. Officially, it's for spiritual connection. Unofficially, it's stored in the throne room's left drawer under a velvet cloth and some emergency chocolate. As for My Mind is a Duck, it becomes folklore. The melody is forbidden in public, but played nightly in every pub that still has floorboards. Whistling it in the presence of a noble is considered both treason and a compliment. The original lute is enshrined in the Royal Museum, accompanied by a plaque that reads, Unknown Key, Unclear Purpose, Unforgettable. History books will later summarize this era as the Soft Reign, marked by diplomatic breakthroughs, unusually poetic legislation, and the lowest incidence of duels in recorded history. No one remembers what the original diplomatic pigeon was supposed to deliver. The village square smells like baked apples and suspicion. You're standing shoulder to shoulder with a crowd of very certain people who have no idea why they're here, but they brought torches, and that feels like commitment. In the middle of it all, tied to a post more for dramatic effect than necessity, is Mags the healer. She's chewing something, slowly, like she's got all the time in the world and possibly a recipe forming in her head. Something earthy, a little sweet, slightly illegal. The magistrate is trying his best to look stern, but his powdered wig keeps slipping sideways. He's sweating like the trial is against him, not her. Mags, he begins, in the voice of someone who's already lost an argument at breakfast. You are hereby accused of unnatural communion with herbs, communing with spirits. And he squints at the parchment, plant whispering of the 3rd degree. Someone in the back gasps, or maybe sneezes. The distinction is lost to the moment. Mags tilts her head, unbothered. I didn't whisper to them. They whispered to me. This is not the denial the magistrate was hoping for. The jury, 12 villagers in varying degrees of knitted shawls and unearned authority, leans forward. There's a long pause while they try to look judgmental and not distracted by the scent wafting from Mags's satchel. A satchel that, to be fair, is softly humming. You're not supposed to giggle during witch trials. It undermines the whole fear-based system, but it starts with one juror, a woman named Hilda who once swore off laughter because it ruined the knees. Her snort is quiet at first, almost respectable. Then, it spirals. By the time the 3rd juror collapses off their bench from laughing at absolutely nothing, the trial has developed a tone. The magistrate bangs his staff and shouts something about dignity and the flames of justice, but he's cut off by Mags offering him a cup of calming tea, which he takes, sips, then sits down and mutters something about how stars probably taste like chamomile. The crowd is restless, but not in the usual angry mob way, more in the should we be sitting for this way. Someone unrolls a picnic blanket. Someone else pulls out bread. Gerald the goat is somehow there again, already halfway through a basket of trial muffins. Mags, still technically on trial, begins offering advice to passers-by. Yes, drink water before bed. No, that rash probably isn't cursed. Yes, the talking fern is real, but only responds to compliments. She's in her element, surrounded by herbs and allegations, and the lines between healer and mystic, witch and wise woman, begin to blur like ink left in the rain. Eventually, no one can remember who made the accusation in the first place. A small boy approaches with a question about dreams. An old man asks if he can swap his bad knee for a quieter one. The magistrate is lying on the grass, watching clouds and softly saying, "They're dancing." By dusk, the trial is quietly abandoned. The rope is untied, not because she demanded it, but because it was starting to chafe, and someone thought that seemed rude. The crowd disperses in groups of 2 or 3, holding little herb bundles and vague advice about breathing techniques. Mags doesn't leave the square. She just sets up a stool, lights a small incense bundle, and puts out a wooden sign that reads, "Cures, conversations, and comfortable silences. Donations welcome. No curses unless requested." By the end of the week, it's a spa. Sort of. There's no water, but there's a bowl of smooth stones and music made from wind chimes and 2 spoons. People come from neighboring villages, not to condemn her, but to see what the fuss is about, and maybe get something for that tension in the shoulders that only witchcraft or very good massage can solve. The old accusations fade like smoke. The jury members become regulars, and if the plants do still whisper to Mags, no one asks what they say. They're too busy feeling better. The cellar smells like wax, damp wood, and whatever thoughts smell like after fermenting too long in bearded heads. The ceiling drips in slow, lazy intervals, like time itself is tired. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat of uncertain origin beside a man named Elowine, who believes vowels have feelings and consonants are just trying too hard. He hasn't blinked since you arrived. Around you, a gathering of self-declared philosophers reclines on cushions, barrels, and one surprisingly serene goose. No one remembers who invited the goose. No one questions her presence. She listens better than most of the attendees and only honks during interruptions. The discussion tonight started with, "What is truth?" and then devolved into an extended metaphor about soup. Not the making of soup, but the being of soup. As in, am I the broth or the spoon, or am I the steam that escapes before I can be tasted? You're not sure who said it. Possibly the goose. A small pipe makes its rounds. It's carved from olive wood and inscribed with spirals that probably meant something once. Now they're just smooth from decades of thumbs. The smoke tastes of old herbs, dried fruit, and possibly raisins that made some questionable life decisions. You don't remember saying much, but you do remember listening. One thinker, Leuven, has reached the part of the night where he insists colors are just moods doing cosplay. He gestures wildly at his tunic, which is technically beige, but he calls it sad warmth. Another man argues that time is flatbread, to which someone else counters, no, time is clearly stew, always changing, always warm, and better the next day. That person is instantly voted chair of the moment, and you well. You're floating somewhere between observation and participation. The floor feels like it's made of forgiving moss. The candles flicker in sync with your heartbeat. Someone asks what you think, and you mean to respond with something clever about interconnectedness and maybe goats. But what comes out instead is, it's the energy, you know? The room stills, heads tilt, eyebrows rise. Even the goose pauses mid-preen. Someone whispers, "Write that down. You hadn't meant it as profound." Honestly, you were just trying to explain why sitting near Eloin makes you feel like your thoughts are wearing wool. But now, there are nods. Serious ones. Thoughtful ones. One man clutches his chest like he's been personally validated. Another scribbles the phrase into the dirt floor with a spoon. The cellar fills with the kind of silence that hums. A consensus spreads without being spoken. You've captured something. Not a philosophy exactly, but a vibe. A whole new category of understanding that doesn't demand logic or debate, just a gentle nod and maybe a shared snack. The phrase is repeated, slowly, lovingly. It's the energy, you know? They add it to the chalkboard of thoughts at the back of the room, right under, "Why is soup?" and above, "Is language a betrayal of feeling?" It becomes a motto, a mantra, a reason for postponing decisions and taking long walks for no reason. Elowine leans in, his eyes glassy with admiration and also a touch of candle smoke. That's everything," he murmurs, as if you've just handed him the missing piece of a puzzle he didn't know he was building. You spend the rest of the night talking about everything and nothing, about stars and breadcrumbs and how furniture is just socially accepted immobility. And the pipe returns, and the candles melt down to stubs, and no one moves to leave because, frankly, leaving feels like a betrayal of the current vibe. By morning, you stumble out into the gray dawn, unsure if hours have passed or years. Your tunic smells like wisdom and firewood. Your thoughts are slightly sideways, but in a good way. No one remembers all the topics discussed, but they all remember what you said. It's the energy, you know? The sea is glassy and wide, a lazy stretch of horizon that feels like it might spill over if you lean too hard. Your ship creaks in the way old things do when they're trying to sound mysterious, but mostly it's just the wood complaining. The crew is sunburnt, salt-crusted, and about 4 weeks past any real sense of purpose, but no one minds much. The map was lost 3 ports ago, and now navigation is determined by the angle of seagull glances and whether the clouds feel inviting. You are not on an ordinary voyage. The galley, once a place of bubbling stews and aggressive ladles, has transformed. Hammocks swing lazily. Lanterns are covered in dyed cloth to soften the glow. The cook, who now goes by Mist, distributes small bundles of dried plant matter wrapped in parchment made from someone's old journal. He does this with the solemnity of a monk and the posture of a man who is fully committed to never wearing shoes again. They call it the calm zone. Here, orders are suggestions. Arguments dissolve before they start. One sailor swears he saw the captain mid-mutiny attempt, but then someone passed him a pipe and he forgot what he was rebelling about. Now they're best friends and have matching stick and poke tattoos of vaguely optimistic slogans like "Float on" and "Yes." The sea is less a challenge and more of a playlist now. Waves roll in rhythm with the ship's slow glide, and everyone seems convinced that dolphins are leaving messages in the foam if you squint hard enough. One deckhand spends entire afternoons doing interpretive dance for the gulls. They seem unimpressed, but he's never been happier. You begin to hear rumors, whispers passed between passing ships, in ports, in storm shelters where sailors shelter more from themselves than the weather. A ghost ship, they say, sails just beyond the mist. No flag, no name, no shouting. They call it the Floating Cloud Club. No one ever sees it directly. They just feel it nearby. A warmth in the air, a breeze that smells faintly of lavender and toasted cinnamon bark. Stories vary. Some say it's crewed by the world's first sea philosophers. Others claim it's staffed entirely by retired cats who've reached enlightenment. One man insists it's not a ship at all, but a floating tavern run by sentient fog. He says this very seriously before eating an entire orange without peeling it. Your own ship drifts more than sails now. Purpose has become a group project, and everyone's okay with not finishing it. Meetings are held in silence, with decisions made by slow nods and the communal raising of eyebrows. Someone introduces a vibe stick, which is passed around until the holder feels moved to speak. Some hold it for hours, others just hum. The captain, now referred to as Captain sometimes, holds court in a beanbag thrown unconvincingly over a barrel. He offers guidance in the form of riddles that don't always make sense but always feel right. When the moon winks, turn starward, he says one evening, staring deeply into a bowl of lentils. You think often about the ghost ship. You wonder if you've already been aboard and just didn't notice. Maybe it's not one ship, but any ship that forgets to care too much. Maybe it follows you, waiting for the moment a crew stops rowing and starts swaying. One foggy morning, your ship passes through a stretch of sea where the air is thick with stillness. The sails hang loose, the gulls don't caw, the waves hush like they're eavesdropping. In the mist, you see shadows' masts that aren't quite real, laughter that echoes without origin, a glint of gold shaped like nothing in particular. Then it's gone. But no one panics. No one even speaks. You all just sit quietly, breathe, and pass the pipe. The silence is soft, not empty. You never find the ghost ship again, but the calm zone stays. It starts with a whisper. Not a literal one, no sentient leaves leaning over to gossip, but something subtler, like a memory trying to be born in the back of your brain. You're in a city where the signs shout and the sidewalks hum, and yet somewhere, behind the noise, there's that smell again, earthy, unbothered, slightly smug. They banned it here, of course, loudly, with great ceremony and official stamps. There were speeches about moral decay and the dangers of lounging. Posters warned against the creeping green. The mayor held up a dying plant in a plastic bag and declared it the enemy of ambition. The crowd clapped, mostly because there were snacks. But then, someone's rooftop garden bloomed, mysteriously overnight. Just one plant, standing proud like it had RSVP'd to a party no one invited it to. A neighbor tried to report it but got distracted halfway through, filling out the complaint form and started doodling stars. The plant stayed. Soon it was popping up in alleyways and community compost bins. Someone swore it was growing out of a cracked traffic cone. Another claimed their cat brought it home like a trophy. It appeared in old teapots and between the pages of library books that hadn't been opened since the 70s. People started finding it in places plants shouldn't be: bread boxes, forgotten coat pockets, beneath couch cushions with the loose change and existential dread. It's not aggressive. It doesn't shout. It just exists, persistently, casually, like it knows it's not supposed to be there and finds that funny. You once tried to get rid of it yourself. You followed the rules, sealed it in a jar, labeled it "Do Not Plant," and buried it 3 feet deep in someone else's backyard during a rainstorm that felt poetic at the time. A month later, you saw it in your windowsill. You don't remember putting it there. No one does. Governments come and go. Empires rise with swords and fall with spreadsheets. Laws are written, rewritten, and eventually forgotten. But the plant? It waits. It outlasts. It adapts. One year, it's blamed for laziness. The next, it's praised for creativity. Politicians take turns loving and hating it, depending on which way the wind and the poles blow. Somewhere, a senator gives a rousing speech against it, then forgets what they were saying and compliments someone's aura. You start to wonder if the plant has an opinion about all this, if it watches you like Gerald the goat, used to calmly, judgmentally, like it knows something you don't, like it is something you don't. You meet people who swear by it, old women who call it blessing leaf, college students who name it after, philosophers and insist it helps them understand jazz, street poets who claim it wrote their best lines for them, retirees who use it as seasoning for soup and conversation. Everyone has a story, and most of them start with, "I wasn't looking for it, and neither were you, but now it's here, in your hand again, a sprig, a wisp, an idea dressed as a weed. You don't smoke it this time. You just sit with it. Watch it sway slightly, even though there's no wind. Maybe it followed you. Maybe it's always been there. Maybe it's not just a plant. Maybe it's a mood. You sit beneath a tree that definitely wasn't crooked yesterday. Or maybe it was, and you've only just now aligned with its particular slant. Either way, the roots cradle you like they've been waiting. The bark peels in lazy spirals. A bird above your head coughs and reconsiders its solo. Somewhere, someone's laughing, but it might just be the wind. The bowl in your hand is warm, smooth, slightly chipped in a way that implies stories. You don't remember where it came from. Probably a gift, or a trade, or maybe it just showed up one day, like the plant that refuses to go away, insisting softly on its own existence. Smoke curls up from it like a lazy thought, one that starts deep in the brain and ends in a shrug. You breathe it in. Time loosens. Not in the dramatic, hourglass-shattering way, just a gentle unzipping. The seconds stretch like dough, slow and sticky. You can feel your heartbeat, but it's not in your chest. It's in your fingers, your toes, possibly your ears. You are suddenly aware of every part of yourself that used to be background noise. They each take a turn announcing themselves. You wave hello. Your thoughts arrive, uninvited but not entirely unwelcome. Some walk in wearing togas, speaking ancient riddles. Others ride goats. Gerald is there. Of course he is. He doesn't say anything, but he nods once, deeply, like he approves of the way you're holding your bowl. This feels important. You remember the cave, the smoke, the stick dance, Groog's pantless enlightenment. You remember the priestess and her sun crush, the wheat field whisperer, the philosopher who forgot to bathe but invented vibes. You remember every time someone thought they understood, only to end up drawing spirals in the mud and calling it art. You remember that feeling, the big slow swirl of something just out of reach, but always just close enough to feel real. You think about everything and also nothing, about how a single leaf once changed the pace of a nation, about how a song called "My Mind is a Duck" almost toppled a monarchy, about the goat sitting by the fire like it had just negotiated peace between dimensions. You think about how sometimes all it takes to start a movement is someone throwing the wrong herb into the right flame. The smoke shifts, and the tree creaks softly, like it's leaning in. You hear your own breath, and it sounds like the ocean telling secrets. You smile, because none of it makes sense, and somehow that's the point. The moment is full, not of knowledge, just being. You understand absolutely nothing, not the origin of the plant, not the nature of time, not why you once mistook moss for meat, or how that healer convinced everyone her houseplants were clairvoyant. You don't understand how the stars managed to look smug, or how the oracle's sigh still echoes when you sit still long enough. But it feels good. The bowl in your hand is lighter now. The sun's doing that thing again, sinking and shining at the same time. The tree hums. Or maybe you do. You're not sure where your body ends and the afternoon begins. And honestly, it doesn't matter. You're here, breathing, watching time turn slowly to soup. And sometimes, that's enough.